David Lee, down at the far end, Director of the Office of Legislative and Regulatory Modernization for Health Canada. Russell Teagarden, next, recently joined the National Organization for Rare Disorders as Senior Vice President for Medical and Scientific Affairs, right? Yukiko Nishimura, who is from Tokyo and is Chief Secretariat of the International Relations for the Japanese Patients Association. So maybe what we'll do is just have you provide a few brief opening comments, and then we'll try to get to some questions. And then we will open up for like 5 minutes for questions from the audience, or 10 minutes if we have the time. So, David, do you want to go ahead and just start real briefly?
Okay, thank you for the invitation. It's been a good year in Canada for orphan drugs. We had a ministerial announcement, so our Minister of Health committed to building a strong framework in Canada. So right now I'm working on regulations, and in the spirit of collaboration, I've gotten amazing help from the FDA and from European sources. So as I'm working through our instructions, I'm getting input from co-regulators. That's very good news, because then Canada really steps into the international structure. We're not just looking at regulations, though. We're looking at what we need as a country to step in this space strongly. So we're dealing a lot with our payers, with our patient groups, to understand what our needs are and putting the structure in. And so this, again, is where we're focusing development. I'll just say also, we're trying to concentrate on things like our clinical research environment. So chances to pull together the consolidation of research ethics boards and other issues from an infrastructure point of view is also something under study.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning. Well, representing National Organization for Rare Disorders here in the U.S., liking to be exceptional, however, has an interest in the idea of globalization. And the reason for the interest in globalization of rare disorders and orphan drug development has to do with one of the higher level, I don't want to say threats, but problems of rare disease, and that is the utilitarian impulse that exists everywhere to do the most good for the most people. And when you take that literally, that would take rare disease out of the picture. And in fact, I recently came from a very large pharmacy benefit firm where we had to consider things for 60 million plus people, and that was generally the way it was thought of. What can we do that's the best for the most? And so it takes effort and consciousness and a philosophical approach to why you have to pay attention to rare disorders. And so the bigger the critical mass that it can be developed will help push back that impulse. And even if you just put human suffering aside, sort of rational thought. So that's why there's an interest on our part on the global picture of it. Let's stop there.
So, and my name is Yukiko Nishimura from Japan Patient Association. And so I'm not sure, so you know about our association, but so JPA is the biggest association of Japanese non-bio area. In Japan, so we don't have any kind of definition of rare diseases, but so we have the meaning of non-bio, the difficult disease, including with rare, intractable, and severe chronic diseases. So it means so our meaning of non-bio is more broader than European meaning and also the American definition. So we have a great number of membership and about 270,000 members, included with individual patient groups and also local regional research center. So, and I'm very happy to introduce ourselves, to industry people in the United States. It is our first time to introduce. And so now, so we are coming to understand what is the importance of international collaborations, coexistence of different diseases. But we are also in a transition period, before starting our international collaborations. This January, so JPA has signed MOU with NORD. After that MOU signing, so we got a lot of contacts, from not only from domestic country, Japan, but also from international. So we are very proud of us. And also, so we have been discussing the partnership between JPA and EURORDIS. So we will collaborate among international sectors for the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Yukiko. In fact, I will start by following up on what Yukiko said, is that when we speak about globalization of access, I think one of the emerging elements is the globalization of the rare disease patient movement. And that has started, obviously, because we already know each other. We already have contacts since years, obviously, since Abby Meyer started NORD. There has been contacts around the world. But now it's becoming more structured. And what has helped with that has been, in fact, the Rare Disease Day taking place around the world, which has been a link between us to work together and raising awareness to the policymaker and to the public. And now we're entering into a phase of more structured partnership around Memorandum of Understanding. We signed one between EURORDIS and NORD in 2009, which goes really in depth of a lot of our activities with joint initiatives. We also signed one with the Canadian Organization for Rare Diseases 3 years later, and now we're discussing with GPA to do the same. And obviously all these organizations to work together, and it's one of our planned action for this year to start the Rare Disease International movement with a patient organization from around the world. Now, that being said, in terms of globalization of access, I'd like to share the following comments, is that what becomes really very clear, crystal clear for EURORDIS, for us, and probably across the stakeholders in Europe, is that the evidence generation on the development and access for orphan drugs is a continuum, that the marketing authorization is not anymore that magic moment. And this continuum needs to be recognized by all stakeholders, but also by regulators. And the second element is that evidence generation on an orphan drugs is on a global scale. So we need to take these two elements together. And maybe to move directly, because that's what I like, to be concrete about what's next. What do we do to change things, to fast track a little bit the policy process? We are currently calling for two specific actions by EURORDIS. One is to have an official policy of flexibility by the European Medicine Agency, and I hope also by FDA, on approval of orphan medicinal products, as it has happened in the past at the moment of the crisis of HIV and also on cancer. So that's possible, and particularly with the new legislations adopted in the US. And in Europe, we're particularly looking at what is called the progressive or adaptive approval, which we call also stepwise patient access using conditional approval, and the new legislative framework in Europe on pharmacovigilance, which enable that kind of progressive adaptive access for patients. The second element is that we don't believe not anymore into the joint protocol assistance or joint scientific advice by FDA and EMA. That has been something we've been promoting for years, but that doesn't happen simply because there is so many review division at FDA that it's always a first time when you want to do it. So what we are now more calling for, it's a coordination between the two agencies on what is called points to consider on clinical trial on muscular dystrophy, points to consider on clinical trial on cystic fibrosis, such as there is a dialogue early on between the regulators together with the clinicians and the patients advocate and industry active in that area to agree on some points to consider. This is how we can harmonize probably and fast track more that kind of globalization. And last, obviously, the discussion on registries and on biomarkers are two important topics. And all of these discussions come very nicely together hopefully, into the international consortium of research on rare diseases.
Great. Thank you, Yann. So we've seen this globalization of the research community pretty much through research networks, through collaborations, grants, and what have you. We've seen to some with great deal of difficulty, the globalization and reduction of many of the pharmaceutical industry members of organizations and the consolidation there. We are seeing now the whole globalization of the patient advocacy group. So that sort of leads us right to where we are today, talking about how do we provide for the globalization of products. And when we talk about the globalization of products, we can discuss investigational products and approved products. We can discuss, as Frida mentioned earlier, the repurposing of already existing and approved products or drugs that have already entered into humans in clinical trials. So there are a lot of approaches that we can take. So really, we're going to try to focus on therapies. And so I'd just like to have the various perspectives. Anyone comment on the perspectives, the stakeholders' perspectives to accomplish global harmonization of providing access to treatments, whether they be investigational and approved products. So any comments on that? And I'm going to take a seat over there, just to be a little bit less formal.
So I'll start where Yann sort of left off. I think the mention of adaptive licensing is very key. In building the new Canadian model from a regulatory point of view, we've been in discussions with FDA and the European authorities for some years on how to do this. It's not the easiest thing to design in the world, but we know that raising certainty, both pre-market and post, takes some sensitive tools. It takes putting some evidence development and understanding as a regulator how to deal with it, how to bring it from the treatment context into our assessments, and then also work with our payers so they can develop more confidence as well in what they're seeing with the drug. So this is very key for us to understand how that dynamic's going to work, how we license out in situations where we do have uncertainties to resolve. It's a great conversation, and from a legal point of view, we're trying to give that as much support as we can. So I'll just start there. I'll also say for repurposing, we're also looking into exclusivities that can be associated with that, because that's one gap we could potentially have from an exclusivity point of view. So we're also looking at that.
Yeah, on harmonization, back to my theme, I mean, the more groups that come together and agree that this is important beats back those questions that do come up amongst big payer groups or policymakers or others that are vying for the same resource. Why should I care? And is this a credible issue? And so the more organizations in it, the more countries, the more harmonization is. It lends a lot of credibility and momentum to answer that question. Well, a lot of people care, and a lot of people are putting energy into it. And so it helps make the higher level case.
So, and JP has a lot of activities related to policy recommendations. And so we also petitioned to the Congress and about early access to the drug and diagnosis information and so on. But unfortunately, maybe you know, so there's no department related to orphan drug in the PMDA, Japan's FDA. So it's very hard to negotiate with, collaborate among. So, and usually we can't understand so how to make progress international, or so. So I'm sure so we need to set up immediately so the orphan drug department in Japanese ministries.
The way we're looking at the situation in Europe at the moment is very much in trying to bring together much more the centralized regulatory agency, the EMA, together with HTA agencies and with payers. And that's easy to say. It's another thing to make it really happen. And the stage where we are today in Europe is that after several years of debates, of reports, of workshops, and etc., we are at the stage where this policy now is being formulated. So we know what we want to do and how we want to have that dialogue happening, but now we're only at the stage where it's starting to happen. So it takes always much more time than what we think, but we think it's absolutely critical to involve the HTA and the payers at the time of protocol assistance early on so that they know what the issues are, at the time of marketing authorization so that we build trust in the evaluation by the medicine agencies on safety and efficacy, and also that there is a dialogue on what kind of additional post-marketing activities, research activities are needed. This is what counts for HTA and payers, the uncertainties and what they are paying for. And more we will see the registries playing that key role in providing the individual evidence knowledge in order to assess whether that drugs is bringing a meaningful, translate into a meaningful medical advantage on each patient for reimbursement. So this is where we are in the process, and there is plenty of acronyms going with that, but I'm sure we'll go back to that in the panel tomorrow afternoon.
Okay, we're going to switch over to the cost and the pricing of products. It's always a tremendously sensitive issue. And so I think your opinion, your reflections on basing the price of products on the value of the potential product to the patient and the community, and also the cost associated with the generation of evidence. Any comments on where we're going, what you're seeing as far as pricing, maybe controls or access to products based on cost?
What we can say is there is clearly consensus among industry in Europe and also patients on that. There is ambiguity on the public policy decision makers, that they say value, but at the end, they're still looking very much at price, obviously, and the budget impact at the national level, but then at the cost, because it's such a high price that they want to have little more information about the cost, an explanation of why it comes so high, which was addressed in some of the previous keynote speeches. But value-based pricing is the only future we have in order to convince society to pay these high prices for rare diseases. If not, price is only a price, and cutting on price in order to save money for the healthcare budget is the easiest thing you may want to do. So the only way to fight back is to base it on value. And the ongoing discussions in Europe at the moment is how can we have common guidance on assessing that value. And for the first time, we had 12 member states, the payers in the member states, together with industry and us as patient group, and the European Commission agreeing on a transparent value framework to assess it. It's a starting point. There will be pilots. And based on this common assessment of value, and based on the volume of patients to be treated by the therapeutic indication, and on the post-marketing research activities, when you take these three elements together, then you can negotiate a possible price at the European level. And this is where the new conversations come in on price, such as how do we manage entry agreement? How do we have differential pricing? All these debates are absolutely new. 2 years ago, they were not happening. But that's the way to address the current economic challenges. And although we are not there yet, but a lot of the member states or representative of different administrations in member states, like payers, insurance, and all that, are looking at it as a way to address these economic challenges while providing access to patients.
Price, touchy situation, between payers, either somewhere between not wanting to stop innovation, not wanting to be taken, wanting more information. No one will argue with the value piece. But even in the U.S., even if there's broad agreement that a particular price represents value, doesn't mean a particular payer still has the money. I mean, we have a very fragmented payer situation. There could be a very, very high-priced product that a big self-insured employer, big carrier, doesn't even touch them. It can be one that I know from talking to various smaller types of plans that it is these drugs and the real expensive ones that are enough to push them out of the healthcare coverage business into the exchanges, et cetera, simply because of the risk of the cost of these. Not that they disagree with it, it's simply a matter of wherewithal. And so there can be products with uncontroversial value, but still out of range. And so it's more than price. It's at least here. It's the structure of the financing and the insurance, et cetera. When the current structure went into place for drugs, which, is early, mid-90s, there weren't many drugs at all that hit these kinds of numbers. And so it was structured this way, maybe $5 for a generic and $10 for a brand and $25 for a non-formulary brand. It doesn't work now. It doesn't work. And so what we're seeing now is some attempts to get to almost like a rider situation, right? What's a specialty tier? It's a rider in any other name. Where you get out to the 25%, maybe there's a cap. But it's a way of starting to get to a different approach that says, well, if you've got bad luck and you're in this tier, well, you got bad luck. It doesn't work, and frankly, it's unfair, right? It's not a matter of being unfortunate, it's a matter of unfair. And it's a way, and you hear this, I hear it all the time in the halls of payers or whatever, well, these people are costing more, they should pay more. Well, that's completely antithetical to the insurance idea. It's supposed to be there for a catastrophe. And so, in my view, there's the pricing considerations, but they're really, at least in this country, we need to rethink and invent a new way of figuring how to pay for these drugs rather than just argue about the price.
So this is something we're really exploring as deeply as we can. Again, it's not something I can look at in another jurisdiction and just put in. And nobody's got that yet. So it does take collaboration and discussion, but there is some promise, we think, in the model.
Okay, good. Yukiko?
So compared to other countries or areas, so Japanese and healthcare system is slightly different because we have the unite healthcare system. So it means so there are a lot of supporting services, so for many types of diseases patients. However, as to Nambyo area, so now at ideal, so there are only 56 diseases, are as a target, so to and support the whole medical cost. But there are so many rare diseases or Nambyo diseases in Japan also. So how about the rest of diseases? So now, and Japanese government has been discussing the next and the revision of Nambyo policies, included with whole supporting system. So maybe after the election to senator, so at the next July, so that new system maybe passed. Mm-hmm. So please let you check, after that on the website.
Okay, good. Thank you. So for our European and Canadian colleagues, Roy, any comments on the pilot concept and the transfer value framework? Or?
I'll tell you more when it happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was sort of wondering what it was too. So.
Yeah. No,
I think it's the more the progressive or adaptive discussion we're having.
Yeah, I think what was really tough already was 2 years of discussion was these member states and with the European platform of payers to come to that. And that European transparent value framework, which is kind of a matrix to shape the discussion, it's not something to calculate any price, but just to shape the discussion, is obviously intended as a pilot in order to take us as the next step to negotiation on price and then on joint procurement between member states for some diseases, particularly for the rarest disease that would be appropriate, or this market entry agreement, which at the same time are very much progressing in terms of harmonization across Europe. Harmonization may be too strong, but coordination between the member states on this market entry agreement. So it's a process. I think we need to look at it not as something that would produce effect 1 or 2 years from now. Obviously, it's much more slower dynamic than that. But we can clearly see the trend because everybody see the advantages. But the short term is really to have that dialogue between HTA and regulators. That's essential, and particularly for the post-marketing research activities. This is key, and for that there is very concrete elements which are there for implementation in 2013, 2014 and beyond.
Yeah, and it really is that coordination point. We've just sent over one of our senior scientists to sit permanently on the European Pharmacovigilance Board, and we're trying to create links, especially in the on-market world, that will help us understand the drugs better. And frankly, that kind of collaboration has been open for quite some time. Just building the Orphan framework right now, the European authorities are helping us a great deal, and have been inviting more discussion about the HTA environment as well, because if we're all asking for evidence, not coordinating it well can be very punishing, I think, for everybody. So we're trying to understand how to ask for the evidence in a more coordinated manner.
Okay, thank you. So we are running down to about the 8-minute mark here. So the very last point of discussion, what can the stakeholders do to help harmonize global access to interventions? I mean, and we do have a number of stakeholders, the research community, the industry, patients, and the like. So any thoughts about what we can do better? I mean, I think at one point in time, way back in the 70s and early 80s, we talked about that some products would remain in investigational status forever. You know, that they may never get out of investigational status, and we'd continue to make products available. But from my perspective, I just see that a number of resources now are available in the public-private sector that we can combine the forces and effect this collaboration, that we can utilize resources from both communities and really begin to make sure that the products become more readily available. So I don't know if you had any comments about how we might be able to make this a little bit better.
Maybe I can start just going back to some of my initial comments, is that as a parent, because I have myself a daughter with cystic fibrosis who is 23 years, and I don't see, except Calideco, but that's not for her yet, I don't see much progress. So I'm very much like other people in this room, and I'm becoming much more impatient. And I think that calling for, as I said, for an official policy of flexibility by the EMA and FDA on orphan medicinal products doesn't mean compromising the kind of assessment for quality and safety and efficacy, but it means increasing the number of products which are able to get to the stage of marketing authorization with a proper control after that for a progressive introduction. So this for us will increasingly be a key topic that we're calling for action. The second one is these points to consider on clinical trials for protocol assistance and marketing authorization and post-marketing of these specific diseases, where there is several products under development in a disease, in a specific disease area. And that's essential, because then it's a potential to make the most of the knowledge between the clinicians, between the different companies involved, the patient groups, and the people responsible in the regulatory bodies, but also to bring together this FDA and EMA. Because that has been discussions for 20 years. But let's face it, except what we initiated with Marlene when she was in charge of the Office of Orphan Drugs, with the common dossier for orphan drug applications, which now is common on both sides in US and Europe, and the monthly conference call, what else is new? What else is new to really support development of orphan drug? Very little. So really, I think these points to consider can be a key area. And next is the registries, and you know that very well, Steve. The registries, having common principles and policies, common data set, interoperability, and etc. in the field of registries, having disease registries rather than product registries, and etc. That's really a way to look at globalization and to improve the knowledge generation and to save time and resources also.
Yeah, I think that's a subject we could spend at least 2 full days discussing registries, and we'll talk about that later this afternoon, so hopefully you can join us at that discussion and follow up. Any other comments? Thank you, Yann, for your comments, too.
So from a Japanese patient's perspective, so of course I would hope Japanese ministries to collaborate among international governments, but so I don't know, and they understand the importance or not. But so for us now, as I said before, so we have signed the MOU with Nord and also made EURORDIS for the near future. And so we are creating the Asian patient network. So it means not from the government side, but from patient side. So, and we can get the very valuable information,
through the international network. That's very valuable for us.
From the patient stakeholders, I think there's already, from what I can tell in my short time here, but a harmonization, if you will, of mind to bear a lot more risk than the ordinary situation. And what needs to be harmonized is a medium for that to be clear. Now, I think that the way these organizations have begun to come together are going to form that single medium in order to allow the harmonization of the patient groups be able to amplify their view that they expect things to go faster, they expect their needs to be met, and they will be able to communicate some important concepts like, we're willing to participate in every way, we're willing to take on more risk than what you're ordinarily, you hear from people. So there is, I think the harmonization in these groups and to harmonize the medium for them will make it louder and clearer.
As a regulator or somebody that proposes rules, I can say that one thing that helps collaboration, and I've seen more progress in this in the last few years, is to push fear out of the room when we're redesigning. When we first started talking about concepts like bringing HTAs to the table, there was the tension was really palpable. So actually dealing in all the stakeholder communities with the fear level around any small change in the healthcare system, it's been a really big deal. And those conversations, they're not completely calm, but they seem to be calming down so we can actually get to the technical aspects of it, which I would point out is a really good thing.
Great. So we have about 2 minutes. Maybe we can squeeze 2 questions in. Any questions or, okay. Oh, question back here, please.
Hi, thank you. I think it would be extremely helpful if within each patient organization, whether it be EURORDIS in Europe, the Japanese patient organization, if NORD could keep track of a listing within all of the countries where you can let them know a phase 1 is starting for a really rare indication. A central place where advocacy groups could go, industry could go, to let the world know an ultra-rare indication is starting a phase 1. That would be very helpful.
There is Orphanet as a resource. It's run out of Europe. Yann, you probably know more about it, but it does do some custodial sort of work on that.
And certainly if you've looked in clinicaltrials.gov, ct.gov, you can find, a tremendous number of research projects. Not all of them are clinical trials, some are observational studies, and so we always advise the patient advocacy groups to check in with that database on a regular basis because it changes every night. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in fact, in terms of clinical trials, as Steve said, there is NIH.gov, and in Europe there is Orphanet, which are really the 2 key sources on which you can also find the existing patient groups. So on EURORDIS website you will find only our members, but on Orphanet you will find the patient groups existing in Europe, which is obviously much broader. The other element, in order to bring the patients together, NORD and EURORDIS have initiated something called Rare Connect, which are online patient communities, which for the moment, it's only 39 communities, but we're creating one every week or every 2 weeks now. And we're putting more efforts into it, and we're starting the dialogue also with your colleagues in Japan to see maybe hope to potentially extend that, although there is plenty of challenges, technical and financial challenges. But that may be way forward, because there is I don't believe in any comprehensive system to systematically identify rare disease patients here and there. But if there is leadership from a patient group or from clinicians somewhere, then yes, there is possibilities and tools that exist out there to take initiatives.
But rather than sending people all over the place, I take your point, Laurie, and I want to talk to you more about that, because if we can consolidate and make it easier, I understand.
Yeah, we in our office, we've just completed a review of patient advocacy groups, trying to figure out where they are and everything else, and we're getting ready to share that with the various patient organizations around the world, so that is something that's coming. So one more question, please, from the audience. Yes.
It's sort of a question. I guess the one thing that I've noted in developing drugs for these diseases is that there's not harmonization across the regulatory agencies, and EMEA has actually most recently made it even more difficult now with the pediatric investigational plan, which is binding, versus the US and Canada. I was wondering if anybody up in the panel can do something about making this process more harmonized and easier for people like me running a biotech company that needs to go through these processes to get to approval.
Well, I certainly won't, as a Canadian, speak for both US and Europe, but I can say that when we join the international tables, regulators do want to talk about working together. There is a realization that the companies are global, the patient groups are global, and we do get to see discussions on how we can start to move together. We'll never actually have our rules lining up, but for example, in my country, there have been agreements between my Prime Minister and the President to harmonize wherever possible. So whenever I'm writing a policy, first thing I get asked downtown when I bring it to my parliament is how much like the American rules really is this? And I have to show that it is. It's a very good exercise. And so too, we're looking at Europe, because the more we can step in cleanly, that's just a good thing. And frankly, both the office in the States and Europe have said, come and look at the application form with us and try to step into the framework the way you can. So I think that's encouraging. Where Europe and the States will go, I don't know. We get to watch that. That's a particular Canadian behavior. We often sit in between, but certainly we are attracted to the fact that this is at least one area where we do see more cooperation than other clinical areas, for example.
And to conclude, I think as we move forward with the EURORDIS, the International Rare Diseases Research Consortium, we have the opportunity to bring the various partners together. And if I can put a request in, we do need a greater industry presence there to have your voice heard and your direction. We've engaged the patient advocacy community now within EURORDIS, and we've got the research community, and that's really was the basis of the whole organization. But we quickly expanded it to include patients, industry, and the regulatory agencies. So we do need your presence, we need your input and advice and direction, and as was mentioned in the previous speech, the meta-collaboration, Frida, thank you, great term, it's definitely the most important feature of rare diseases research and orphan products development. We've got to work together, we've got to collaborate, and I think you've heard from the patient organizations, the patients are there, we're willing to collaborate. Now we've got to get that one piece of the pie yet called patient registries and natural history studies. I think we'll complete the circle that we've talked about to make sure that there is a continuum, there are not these breaks that we frequently encounter with the rare diseases. So I will end it with that, and I do want to thank you for joining this meeting. It's really tremendous to see this number of people here representing all aspects of the rare diseases community, and we thank you for taking your time for Pinky and the group for putting the meeting together. It's a tremendous meeting, and thank you very much for joining us, and I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you.